Can I explain the copyright claim thing for you? Oh, if you're editing a review of the Queen's Gambit, okay, sure. I'll explain the copyright thing. On YouTube, generally on YouTube, if you have seamless video going for under 10 seconds, so I don't know what editing software you're using, but if you have seamless footage of a copyrighted material and you keep it under 10 seconds, then you won't be claimed. From here, I see on the time marker 31:43:13. I know that this clip, at the end of it, 31:51:15, so that's about 8 seconds. It's under 10 seconds. From 43 to 51, it's about 8 seconds. And whereas in some situations it might be more practical to leave a scene going, you want to make sure that the visuals, the visual component, stay under, I would say 10 seconds is safe. For music, and this includes music within the score of the film, you want to make sure that that's like under 8 seconds, maybe under 7 seconds, because music is a lot easier to detect for them and a lot more interpretable in the algorithm. So I've had claims for like my music in the actual video will be over the course of 8 seconds, but in the claim it'll show up as 10 seconds, and it'll include the 2 seconds after the music has already stopped, which is fucking annoying. So if you can structure what you're creating in a way where your clips are to the point, shortened, and remember, you can play around with it as much as you want. Like, in terms of editing, so like this, when I say seamless versus unseamless, technically this scene is happening before, sorry, this shot is happening before this shot in the real film, without my editing. But there's like the shot of Zazu before that shot and a couple other things, right? There's another 5 seconds in there before it gets there. But if you cut out the 5 seconds and just go from this to Mufasa being angry, then you can trick the content ID system because it's not seamless anymore. And so if you create your whole thing, you can utilize music from the series in the background. As long as you keep it at a low volume, it's not going to detect it. That's totally fine. Yeah, with Kimba, I don't think any of the music in Kimba is on Content ID, maybe some of it. But, like, there's a billion songs that I've used that are Content ID applicable that have not gotten detected because they're at a low enough volume where it's like, yeah, you can still hear it and you can still tell that it's there. But, like, keep in mind that there's a big difference when you're looking at, even though what I'm about to show you is music that won't get detected. So look at the waveforms here. So here, where my mouse is, you can see the waveforms.
The Lion King 2019 is one of
so
the
this is
most
with my voice
embarrassing
and the
pieces
music
of garbage I've ever watched.
You can see the audio
And what
popping
makes
up
it
and
extra
down.
embarrassing is that
And so if I muted the voice here and just left the music, you can see it's like relatively low there, right? It doesn't go past right here where my mouse is. But then when my voice comes back in, you can see.
But unfortunately,
it
every
jumps up
attempt
to like
at
way
updating
over
and
here.
improving upon the original only made
So
it
you can
much
see like there's a bit, like, remember that the computer is interpreting it in a way that only, you know, like it's still a computer interpreting it. It's not like they're being asked the question of like, do you recognize this song, sort of thing, right? Like it's the waveforms that the computer algorithm is detecting. So if you keep it at a low enough volume, then it's not going to know it's there. And if all of the music that you're using is from the show that you're reviewing, and all of the footage you're using is from the show that you're reviewing, and you are confident that what you've created is something that is not being used as a replacement for experiencing the actual show, and that it exists for your commentary on the actual show or your review of the actual show, then even if it does get detected, You can fight it and win, and I can help you with that. And eventually, even if it takes 3 months, your content will be monetized and unblocked on YouTube. The easiest way to operate on YouTube is to not get detected in the first place, which is why I edit my shit the way that I do at this point. So yeah, it's great not to get detected, but if you do, you know, if what you're using is something that you can argue a reasonable fair use, then it's really, you know, you can fight it. And it's really just it's a flip of the coin, a roll of the die. It's a D20 as to whether or not it's going to take a day or 3 months to resolve the dispute. So
Being woke.
oh yeah, one more thing actually. So the streams that I'm doing right now, I upload to the plays through channel as unlisted, and eventually I put them into playlists. And so as I'm going over all of this footage,
You see,
and I'm like
you're not
playing
allowed
through
to
it,
show
and I'm
gay
watching through it
characters
right
in
now,
movies.
like all this shit, you know, like I'm going over it and seeing how it is. As I'm doing that, and I'm recording and I'm streaming my editing process, I can then upload my editing process that I'm capturing right now to YouTube, and I can see when I upload it within 12 hours of me uploading it, depending on when it gets detected, but I can see if it gets claimed on YouTube and for what. Because an automatic claim will tell you where in the video it is. And so if there is a moment where I'm watching through it and I know this is like the edited version and it's just a watch through and it's going content detected by Lion King video or Lion King soundtrack, and it's already a part of my edit and not just stuff that I'm going over before the actual cut down edit, then I know that it's getting copyright claimed and I can fix that before I publish the actual review. It doesn't have any negative effect on my channel because it's unlisted. I don't know if that's true. It's just that the editing streams that I'm uploading, I'm not planning on fighting the copyright claims on those, and I don't give a shit if they're unresolved. Strikes can go against your account, and there's like a 3-strike rule, but a simple claim is not a strike. So a strike would be if you submitted a dispute and then the dispute was rejected by the copyright claimant, and then you submitted an appeal and the appeal was rejected, then you get a strike. And even then, if you're within fair use guidelines, you can get rid of the strike by submitting a counter notification as long as you don't delete the video as much as YouTube pretends like you should. But you can submit a counter notification after that and then get your video back up as long as you're within fair use guidelines. I know, it's stupid. It's absolutely fucking stupid. They actually changed the system in a way where, like, this didn't always used to be the case, but they make it like, so like if your appeal gets rejected by the copyright holder and they're the only people that review it, so your appeal is like your second dispute basically, and you only get 3. I mean, you get more than 3, but like if 3 come back as strikes, then your channel gets deleted, so you shouldn't use more than 3. When you sent an appeal and it came back as a rejected appeal, which then gave you a strike, it used to be that on your end you would see, okay, you can either delete the video or send a counter notification. Now what they do is they say, your strike will be removed if you delete the video. And you will not get a strike if you do this within 7 days. But what they don't tell you is that after the 7 days, you can just file a counter notification. So they, like, YouTube in their system on your end, they're trying to like incentivize you not to escalate it to a counter notification, because counter notification is literally just you saying, fuck you, sue me. And a corporation is not going to sue you if you're within fair use, really. I mean, like, they might, but if you look at case law like Lens versus Universal Corp, anything like that. Like, there have been several precedents set, especially in the United States, where, if you cannot really prove that, like, the corporation has lost money or lost revenue or sales or whatever by your video existing, even if it's not necessarily like a commentary or criticism on the original. Like, Lens versus Universal Corp was literally like, a woman was filming her baby dancing to a Prince song, and she won the case. Where, like, even though the Prince song was playing in the background, even though she wasn't commenting on it, even though she wasn't criticizing it, it was not a review of the Prince song. It was entirely incidental, but she won the case, and this was like a landmark fair use case. And so, like, people have a lot of fucking misconceptions about fair use, and they think that, like, they think that there are, like, individual qualifying factors to fair use when that's not really the case. It's literally just, like, so interpretable, and it's intentionally left that way because when they wrote the law, they wanted to anticipate for forms of art that they weren't considering, because art is something that, grows and is not something that you can place inside a cage, inside a bubble, right? So they intentionally wrote the law so vaguely that the entire premise of it is basically like, although there are factors that go into considering whether or not a usage of copyrighted material is fair, none of those factors on their own are qualifying as a yes or no. So there is literally no limitation. You can literally make an argument in court. You can literally make an argument in court that using the entirety of a copyrighted material, like the entire movie, you could say that that's fair use. And I'm not saying that that is, but you can make that argument in court because there's technically no limitation. There's no 1%, 5%, 100%. You could literally argue that in court 100% for fair use. If let's say the original copyrighted material was only 5 seconds long and you were doing a review on it, then you would probably have to use a 100% of the original material to make a review on it, right? So, yeah, they intentionally wrote the law in a way to account for the variety of art that's not only art from the claimant, but art from the person being accused of copyright infringement. Same rule apply for audio? Yeah, fair use. Same rules apply for audio. Like, you can make a case in court, but it has to be fair. You have to be able to like, whatever you're making, you have to be able to consider in your mind the most important factors being, is what I'm creating serving as a substitute for the original? Is there a negative effect on the market of the original, which isn't even all that important when considering reviews, especially because you can say this movie is bad, don't watch it, and it's inherently a criticism of the original, which is entirely fair use, right? And that might have a negative impact on the market, but you're allowed to review things, right? Describing the plot of something is, not necessarily copyright infringement. You can do that on Wikipedia. Wikipedia has plot summaries of things. But whatever you include in your review, you have to make sure that you're presenting it and editing it in a way where you can make the argument and you know that it's true to yourself, and therefore you can present it to other people this way, that the amount of footage that you used is necessary to create what you wanted to create. That doesn't mean that, like, every single frame that's in your video is something that you were directly criticizing or commenting on. It just means that you have to be able to be confident that you can say, what I've created is not a substitute for the original product. What I've created is not the experience of watching the original. Even if I'm describing what happens in the original, it's not the experience. No one's going to my Twilight Adam and Pals videos to get the same experience that they would by watching Twilight. It's literally impossible. You cannot get the same experience watching Twilight as you would by watching my videos. A, because the majority of the movie is cut out. B, because we're talking over the entire thing. C, because we're being entirely critical towards it, talking about what we're seeing, right? Yeah. And so, like, even if I uploaded the entire commentary track with video of the original Twilight movie, that could go to court and I could win, but if I don't have to make that kind of like argument, then I won't. You know, it makes much more sense to be within what you consider to be more reasonable fair use than less reasonable, because there might be parts of the commentary where it's like, oh, we're just watching the movie for like a minute and then go back to commenting on it. Then in court, they could say, well, what about this whole minute of the film where you weren't saying anything? You didn't comment on this part, right? So like that's what you have to keep in mind for your arguments. And yeah, there's literally no amount of footage written into law. There's no amount of minutes. There's no amount of percentage of the original. It's literally just whether or not the amount that you used is necessary to create what you've made. Yeah. So that's basically how it works. One of the things to consider with fair use is that, like, it's not even necessarily a game of, like, imagining that you would go to court for any of this. What it mostly is whether or not you think that the claimant would want to go to court over what you're producing, right? So, like, you can have fair use arguments where the most solid fair use arguments you can make are for parody and criticism. But you can have other fair use arguments that you can make for things that are less solid potentially in a court of law, like the way that Nirvana, the band, the show, uses music in their show. When they have a lawyer that worked on Escape from Tomorrow consulting with them over the show, that doesn't necessarily mean that any usage of what they do would hold up in court and they would never have to pay royalties. That's not what that means. It's the fact that they haven't been to court over that show for these royalties that means that what they're doing is a success. It's the absence of them going to court in the first place that is a win. You know? So a lot of fair use law, in terms of like how it applies to somebody making videos on the internet, a lot of it is essentially just trying to call bluffs and see what you can get away with, in a sense, depending on what you're making, depending on the person that you are and what you're willing to risk for artistic creativity and freedom, right? But there are people that operate that way, and they are able to create what they create because a company isn't necessarily going to want to take it to court. So one of the fair use arguments that I've made in a copyright claim was for part one of my amusement video, wherein I got claimed for the Ave Maria song that I used when she was constructing her sandwich. And during that point, that song should be public domain, but the recording that I used technically wasn't public domain because it was a specific recording of the song that they have the rights to, whereas the song as it's written itself is technically public domain, but the recording that I used was not. But the argument that I made in my dispute was essentially that what I was doing, despite my entire video not being a criticism or a commentary on that song, the way that I used it in editing, A, was pointing towards the nature of the song as a commentary sort of way, as a criticism sort of way, invoking this sort of like, okay, because I used it in this way in editing, I am essentially commenting on what the genre of the song is and using it in a context that is atypical, polarizing, and juxtaposed to a context that the song would normally be used in. So an unfair use of that song might be an unironic usage of it where the emotions that the original song or that recording of the song are trying to get at are being expressed in what the final product that someone uses that in is doing, right? So if the emotions of the song are supposed to be like wholesome, angelic, you know, like emotional, and if that was reflected in my video, then I would have less of a case. But because what was in my video, it was done in a comedic sense, and so the emotions and the experience in the final product of my video and in that scene of my video are essentially contradictory to the emotions and the experience of just listening to the original song on its own and the intention with the original song. That's an argument right there on its own that the experience is entirely different. And then on top of that, another thing that I argued was that because during the song, I was using comedic sound effects. I had the shing shing sounds. I had fart sound effects that I recorded, and like her making the fucking, you know, sandwich or whatever. I argued that even if someone wanted to use my video as an alternative to purchasing the original song, even for the small portion of the song that I use that is not the entirety of the song, it would be impossible for them to do so because the sound effects that I added would be distracting. They would take away from the experience that the original is trying to get at. Now, I am not saying that the argument that I made is one that would 100% for sure hold up in court. Would I argue it in court? Yes, I would. And I would fight it because I believe that I am in the right and I believe that it's fair use. But I'm not saying that that makes what I did 100% fair use. However, the argument is there. It is clear. It is logical. You know, at the end of the day, no one's going to my video instead of purchasing that recording of Ave Maria. No one's, you know, there's no website of people going, hey, instead of buying Ave Maria, you should just listen to 10 seconds of this guy's videos. Like, literally nobody's doing that, right? And so if you feel you can make these arguments, and if you feel as though your principles are important enough and you want to expand what people in your country are able to do for fair use or fair dealing is what it's called in Canada. If you're willing to put your own career well-being on the line and say, like, you know what, like, take me to court, sue me, then you can do that. And I've done that a lot, and I have not been sued because everything that I've been doing, I have been able to reasonably argue that what I'm doing is not taking away from the original market of the original copyright holder, essentially. If it goes to court, would I win? Maybe. I would like to think so. I believe I could make a really good argument And, you know, I believe that I could definitely win that in court. Like, it's, you know, what I'm saying is true. Like, it's not harming the original market. If anything, it's promoting it, especially because I do give credit to the songs that I use. And it is critical. It is providing an entirely different experience, etc. But you don't really know if something's fair use until it goes to court. And even if it does go to court, you can always appeal that, right? It's a never-ending, ongoing discussion and battle. So at the end of the day, you just have to consider...
Yes!
UWU.
Thank you so much. At the end of the day, you just have to consider whether or not what you're using is necessary for what you're doing. Whether or not you can live without it, whether or not it's important, you know?
Hi, Patreon credits for February 2021. Let's go. Wholesome 100 Big Chungus Lemonade Warrior, TheMessers.com, Malav Shah, Ocean Machinery, Olivia Spores, Hoofy Dough, Splat, Kirbymon, and Orgasm. Thanks as usual. Bye-bye.